Welcome back. It is the Scaling Secrets podcast with Mr. Raphael Paulin Daigle from SplitBase.com. Now, Raphael is the founder and CEO of SplitBase. They are a conversion optimization and landing page agency helping e-commerce companies increase revenue. Now, Raphael has helped leading brands add millions to their bottom line, including Hyperice, L'Oreal, Dr. Squatch, so many more. And Raphael's excellent podcast is called The Minds of E-commerce, where he interviews e-commerce brand executives on top growth strategies. So we're going to find out about what it takes to scale a landing page agency, how to use landing pages to increase e-commerce performance, and so many other exciting nuggets of information. So Raphael, glad to be speaking with you.
Thank you so much, Robert. I'm glad to be here.
Glad to have you. And so we hyped up the audience, introduced you, but in your own words, what are you all about and what is your current focus and passion?
Yeah, I think the easiest way to put it, you kind of read it and it's like there's a lot of different words and buzzwords, I think. But at the end of the day, I help businesses make their websites better so they can sell more. It's pretty simple when we put it that way. And I've been doing this for 12 years. The agency's been around for probably about 9 years at this point. I just love I love e-commerce. I love building businesses. I'm someone who's very goal oriented. So obviously, there's such a rewarding aspect to helping other businesses grow, right? Like the things that we do sometimes is, we're going to improve a website and that's going to have $1 million a year impact on a business. And those can be household names. And just the feeling that you've contributed to that is pretty cool. So I think that's kind of one of the things that keeps me going as well.
And we all need that, right? We all need that consistent motivation because sometimes we do get discouraged or like, oh, I'm working on this project, can't solve this problem. It's quite a bear. But then when you think about that ripple effect, or you think about, hey, I'm making this landing page and this is going to change so many lives, change so many customers, grow this company, they'll be able to expand, hire employees. That's very motivating, just thinking about all of the good that you're doing in the world, all of the change that you're making. And so tell us about SplitBase. Like, what's it all about and what makes it unique?
Yeah, so SplitBase, what's interesting, right, in the world of e-commerce, there's really been what we call like the direct-to-consumer era that started a couple of years ago. Now, SplitBase been around for 9 years, so a little longer than that period where conversion optimization, landing pages, all those things kind of became hot recently. But SplitBase has been around for longer. So what's been really interesting is, what we do has always been the same. But, we help businesses make their website better so it resonates more with their audiences so they can sell more and so on. And we do that by, improving copy. We have, conversion copywriters. We have conversion designers. So we also improve designs. We change layouts. So we have strategists, data analysts as well, right? Developers. So we have a full team that really can take care of pretty much all aspects of the website. And what's interesting in this space is for so long, I've been running this agency and I've been trying to convince business owners or actually to tell them what conversion optimization is, right? Which is really the act of improving site performance. I think that's the easiest way to put it. And in the past 2-3 years, what's been really interesting is that the market has caught up. And now people don't need to be convinced to do conversion optimization. I think they need to be shown the right way of doing it. And what we've been focusing on in conversion optimization is understanding customers at a qualitative level. So many people, online entrepreneurs, e-commerce businesses, right? We sit in front of a computer. The business is on the internet. The customers are just numbers on the internet, right? We forget that people who buy goods are also human beings with a house somewhere living in a real place. And the approach that's been, existent and mostly popularized over the years with digital marketing and optimization of campaigns and websites has mostly been analytics driven and numbers driven, which, by the way, is great. That's better than gut feeling driven But the thing, again, is you look at numbers and you don't see what people are thinking. You don't see what's going on in people's minds. You don't see what they actually need, in order to get them to buy or to be convinced that your product is, what they need to solve their problem. So our approach has always been about, hey, let's start by understanding your customer. What do they want? What's currently going on in their lives that they're interested in your product or service? What do they care about? What are the other alternatives that they've tried? Right. So we do a lot of deep dives in qualitative surveys, open-ended stuff, interviews, usability testing, things that sometimes get neglected because it takes a lot of work and it takes more real human interactions as well. But that's how we do it. That's how we improve websites. At the end of the day, I truly believe that when you better understand your customer and understand it better than anyone else, you're able to make the website serve those customers' needs better. And as a result, right, the performance will increase and you will sell more. So that's really been our approach. And I'm still championing that approach every day. And I still believe that's the right way of making websites work.
And that is a very cool approach. And there's a lot to think about there, right? Like you said, and I'm digesting all that stuff that you said, which is all very excellent. Like you think, okay, many years ago, the where the marketplace positioning was people just not even really knowing what conversion optimization was, right? Just the awareness of that. But now the market's caught up. Now it's like, okay, are you doing it the right way? And even the way you described it, it sounded like a scientific method, right? Say you're some scientist and you're like,
absolutely,
I want to create a cure for cancer today. Let me try mixing these two chemicals. Well, if you just said, I'll just choose two random chemicals and let's see what the results are, well, you'll run out of time in your lifetime before you tried all the combinations. But if you say, hey, we're going to start with the best practices and what's been done before and kind of think this through and then make a more educated decision, and then we'll try something that hasn't been done before, something that's kind of more gives us more bang for our buck, right? Has a better result. And so that way we're not just testing like, oh, do I do like a blue button or a red button? Or I read on this in the magazine, I should do this. You're saying like, hey, we're going to do a lot of this work and do the usability testing and talk to the customers. And so I imagine that there's these aspects of like, first of all, looking at it with fresh eyes, right? Say there's like a L'Oreal or something. They're in their business every day. Maybe they don't think outside the box. And then there's probably the other aspect of like, they're busy running their own business, right? They can't really do all the legwork that you're talking about of looking at all the market research and talking to customers. And so, I mean, tell us a little bit about some of the change you've made. Like, what are you proud of as far as when you had a client and they said, hey, help us with our e-commerce, our landing pages. You did your magic. What was that process like?
Yeah. So, and I think a good way to introduce this is that at the end of the day, in 2024, a good looking website is not enough if you want to compete online, right? Like everybody can have a beautiful looking website, but that's not enough. Unless you're like Gucci or Louis Vuitton, that, like very high-end premium goods where people come to you specifically and will go through hoops to get your products and they don't care about competition. 99% of businesses out there, you need to make sure your website is built for the customer in mind. So what we do with every client, and I'll use a pretty recent example. So Dr. Squatch, right? Skincare brand, pretty well known across the US. We started working with them 5 years ago. It was, pretty small brand. And then through the 5 years of working together, and, now they're doing hundreds of millions and had an ad during the Super Bowl last year, or the year before. Some of the things that we've done is, okay, well, first let's understand, like, okay, we're selling soaps, right? It's not like the most complicated thing to understand. There are some products difficult to understand, but ultimately, why are people buying these soaps specifically? What are they looking in their soaps? So when we optimize for a website like that, it's important to first understand the customer. And so with them, for example, we've asked questions like, what can you tell us about yourself? Like we've asked that to their customers. Very open-ended, very generic question. But we wanted to know what are things that we would never think to ask clients about that might give us cues about who their audience is. And one of the things we understood at one point was, Dr. Squatch, especially when the brand started, was marketing itself as a very, lumberjack, masculine, manly brand type of thing. And we thought, well, women are never going to buy these products. But at one point, one of the insight that surfaced through this research that there's no way we would have discovered otherwise was that there was a pretty significant percentage of women who were buying these products for their families. So for like their sons or for their boyfriend or husband or whatever. And that actually gave them the idea afterwards of, hey, well, why don't we start creating ad campaigns targeted towards women who wants to buy these products for, the guys in their lives. So, that's the type of thing that we can do. Then they went ahead, they did their own campaign on that end. But, there's other things. For example, we realized, hey, well, people may not just buy a single bar of soap at a time, right? They may want to get a complete solution. So we've tested and helped them figure out, hey, what type of bundles are the best types of bundles to promote to customers, right? What product combination would sell most and ultimately maybe convert first-time customers into lifelong customers, right? What's the product assortment that if we sell on the first, visit, that's going to get people to come back again and again? So you're going to have these type of things that we're going to help businesses with. But then there's also, page layout, website layout. For example, the navigation bar. A brand grows, they keep adding products to their assortment, to their, and ultimately their navigation bar becomes more and more complex. And so should we send people to this product category or that product category first? How should the navigation bar look best for people to buy? So these are the things, that we experiment with. We run tests. We design different versions. And ultimately, within those 5 years of working with Dr. Squatch, we're talking about, pretty much $1 million a month in additional revenue generated through conversion optimization and experimentation. And that also really became like a way of being for that brand as well, which I'm really proud of. It's really something where they think experimentation first. They don't let personal opinions get in the way, which is great. So that's one example, right? Like I think what we do touches a lot of things. Like I said, those are 3 examples of how we've touched it, but the impact is also there.
And they're great examples, and that gives us some good idea into your thought process. And I love just this experimentation mindset, because when we've all heard this, that if you keep on thinking and having the same mentality as you have, then you'll just be getting the same results. You'll just be kind of struggling. You'll be flat growth, just, chugging along. And instead, when it calls for this outside the box thinking, something that's very doable are these experiments that you're mentioning, right? Saying like, hey, well, we've got this demographic we've always had, but what about the kind of hidden demographic? Or what about the page navigation? Or what about we look at what's being sold and like, what about this new kind of product? So I love this because, again, my first impression when you think about like landing page design optimization, I always think about the A/B testing, right? Like move the button over there or change the headline to that, which like that's, I guess, some good low-hanging fruit, but we're always we know we're leaving money on the table, right? We know when there's an ad, only some percentage clicks on it. We know that when they get on our landing page, only some percentage converts. And as you have known and as you've said, with some of these brands with a ton of traffic, with a ton of following, one little tiny percentage point can mean quite a difference as far as profitability and growth and all those other fun things. And so with all of your clients and experimentation, like what surprised you? Do you have a fun story to share with us just about just something that was completely unexpected?
I think, I'll answer this. I'll answer this in a slightly different way, in the sense that I am surprised every day. Now, I work with, directors of e-commerce, VPs of e-commerce, VPs of marketing, CMOs, CEOs, people with a ton of experience, building and scaling e-commerce businesses. And, same thing with my team. We have an extremely experienced team when it comes to, conversion optimization. And there's not a week that goes by where, we look at a website and we say, hey, maybe a better way of doing this is that way, right? And then everybody will be convinced that will be the best way of designing this feature or implementing this element. And what I've learned over the years is you can be so convinced of something, like so convinced because you're experienced. And yet when you A/B test it, almost half the time, I'm saying half the time, I don't know what the percentage, but at least almost half the time, you're wrong. You're wrong, and turns out what you thought was going to perform better was going to make, what you thought was going to make a big difference. It turns out it does the opposite, right? Like, one story is we had one client where, they were updating their branding, they were redesigning their website, and then their product pages, right, where you have like the information for each of the products that they're selling, was redesigned by their team. And it was redesigned with data as well. We helped them with it. And it looked so much better. Like the board saw those pages and they're like, oh, this is great. This is beautiful. Like, there's no way this can perform worse than like our very outdated product pages that lives on the website at the moment. And well, lo and behold, we're like, obviously this is a big business. They're, making dozens and dozens of millions of dollars. And so we still want to test it. There's a chance we're wrong. And of course, yeah, we test it. And that page, even if it looked better, it had all the best practices implemented, it would have cost the business $100,000 a month in revenue if it would have been deployed as is. Right? So that, that was like, whoa, that's a shock, because all these people, all these very highly paid people, very experienced people that have so much experience, no one could have predicted or would have guessed that would have performed worse, right? And that's one thing I find so surprising and so interesting about my job, because I live those situations on a weekly basis. And, when people are so convinced about something, well, sometimes you realize that certainty or that conviction would have cost them big. And that's why experimentation is so important, right? Because no one has a crystal ball. You can't predict the future. And what works for other brands may not work for your brand. You have to try it out. So I almost see experimentation as an insurance policy in some sort of way as well, as much as R&D and innovation.
Right. And yeah, and it should be, right? Because it is an essential part of it. And even someone like you, who's seen all these case studies, who's been in all these situations, you're still surprised. And I think anyone that's done any kind of testing has been there, right? When you say like, oh, well, if I took a video off the page and it converted better, what? I had a shorter headline, it converted better, what? Smaller logo, you're always surprised by just what happens. And that's, I mean, like you said, imagine if you just went with your gut feeling or what everyone else is doing, and then you'd be leaving this money on the table without the essential tool in the toolbox of also testing. And it's kind of like fighting against human nature, isn't it? Because like your human nature wants you to stay in your comfort zone and not really do anything too crazy. And then also when expectations don't meet reality, that's when kind of the anger and discomfort comes into play. But like that's entrepreneurism, right? That's what we need to be kind of going in that direction of bucking the norms and like, using the data to convince us to do something different. And so, and a lot of this kind of breaking outside the comfort zone involves the growing and the scaling and the peopling. And you mentioned a lot of this, right? Of dealing with the team members, the employees, having the difficult discussions, contacting these brands. So in the whole aspect of the people and the networking and the scaling, what do you think that you've done very well that kind of maybe not everyone does?
That's a great question. I guess it depends on the aspect of the business. I can think of many things I would have done differently, but also many things we've done well. And I think one thing we have done well, and it's funny because this one is a bit of a catch-22, but, I'm a bit of a perfectionist. And as an entrepreneur who wants to go fast at the same time, sometimes a bit challenging to, really be happy with what you put out, yet still go fast. And, I also take things very personally most of the time when it comes to our work. Even though my business is bigger than me, we're like 20 people at this point, right? I still feel like, this is a bootstrap business. It's my blood, sweat, and tears. So When I think of, the work that we do, I think the business is 9 years old, but it took a very, very, very long time to get things off the ground. Yeah, we had clients for those 9 years, but it like the the rate of growth was pretty slow for many years. And it's funny because I ask myself every day if I would do things differently. But one of the things is because I really wanted to perfect our offer, what we were delivering. I wanted clients to be incredibly happy. I wanted to be perceived as one of the, best agencies in this space, in this business, right? For me, just signing clients and then, maybe it doesn't work out, we try again with another one. And, seeing clients as numbers, just like I was saying, a lot of e-commerce brands do, like as an agency, I didn't want to do that. Like a lot of these people, you develop relationships with, you work very closely with these people, with these businesses. So we took a lot of time, in just perfecting our offering, and instead of, even investing a little bit in marketing. And I think that slowed us down. Yet now I look back and I'm like, well, patience can be good sometimes, right? Like today, if I look back, well, now we have the authority that I always wanted. We have the traction that we needed, but we also have a delivery system, a way of creating results for client that's incredibly solid, well thought out, right? And that's very clear. And to me, like that's a big piece of the business. Being proud of the work that you do and having something that's kind of tangible in that sense as an operating system in the business. I think that's something we did really, really well. And again, like that insistence for, we create results by better understanding your customers and helping you align with them through your website better, right? Like that's, again, something that we've always done a bit differently, or that we've been talking about louder than a lot of people. And I think it paid off.
And how do you express that sort of? Because it seems kind of intangible, right? Like it's one thing to like kind
Yeah.
of be like, well, here we make these results, we got these clients, and that's kind of like an arms race in itself. But that's what you're saying is the customers are just numbers. So how do you
Yeah.
like express in your marketing this kind of emotional obsession and quest for perfection? It seems like a difficult thing to get across.
I don't know if we've figured that out yet. I'll be honest. The space is, there was a time where we didn't have a lot of competitors. In the past 2 years, the space exploded. Almost everybody says that they're, some sort of CRO expert. Every marketing agency does landing pages or conversion optimization as an upsell. Doesn't mean they're good at it, but it's always a service now that's being offered. Pretty standard across digital marketing agencies. The way we do it, well, obviously, we try to put out a lot of great content. I have the podcast, the Minds of E-commerce podcast, with really amazing, e-commerce brands, talking about how they've built their businesses. So I think content for me is a big thing, right? Because if you look at our website, I mean, there's not a million ways to do conversion optimization. I can tell you how we do it differently, but somebody else can still come in and do that. The couple things that other people can't do is be me, or be the brand that we've kind of created. So I try to put out a lot of content personally, and I hope that through my videos, through our blog posts, even that we post on our website, through the podcast, right, people understand how we think. So I think there's that. The second thing is obviously having been in business for I don't want to say so long because there are so many older businesses, but still, I think in this space, 9 years is pretty good. We do have a lot of really cool logos, if I may say that, right, on our website. We've worked with really cool businesses that a lot of people recognize, and newer agencies don't really have those bragging pieces, if I may say. So I think that helps a lot. And yeah, I think content in this day and age is a really great way, like doing this podcast, right, to just get people to get to know you and your thinking a bit better.
Yeah, and anything to differentiate, right? You differentiate with the
Yeah.
logos and with the content, and even you and I were talking before we hit the record button how much you just love to do that. So there's something to that as well, right? You have like saying like, hey, if I love podcasting,
Yeah.
why shouldn't I just be on podcasts all day long and talk about landing pages in my company,
For
which I
sure.
love to talk about anyway. And so, and like for sure, the content is underrated. Like I'm thinking about, there's a couple of brands where like I watch their YouTube videos every day, like Ahrefs or
Yep.
WP Beginner or Riverside,
Yep.
and they're just talking about like all these things going on in their space that are even like way beyond the scope of their company or their
Exactly.
app, but they're just kind of like thought leaders in a way. And it's like
Yep.
cool to just even, and like I think about them on a daily basis. I open up YouTube and they're always on the front page because the algorithm says, hey, Robert already watches their videos. So it's very like underrated, and probably there's like
Totally.
a delayed gratification. And I imagine that it sets you apart because not everyone does it. Not every company is consistent with it because it's
Hmm.
hard to track the conversion on that because you put out a lot of it and there's like a long process sometimes for someone to remember you and then end up buying from you. And so in the growth of your company, sometimes when we talk to people on scaling secrets, when we talk about like kind of the pivot points, they say, well, my
Yeah.
company was like this up until this revenue or this number of employees. Like, do you think about that at all? Like, were there
Hmm.
any like milestones along the way? Like, was the podcast one, or like were there times when the company was like in this direction and it zagged? Like, what were those sort of stages like?
I think that's a good question. Not an easy one to answer because I feel like there's been a lot of stages, right? Obviously, like the first million. And I think that's probably the case for a lot of entrepreneurs. In a way, like for me, it was like, oh, wow, okay, well, I have a real business. Not that it wasn't a real business when it was making 500,000 or 600, right? Like that was really hard to get to that point. But it's like it's a bit like into the in like in society, like the $1 million is a bit like mythical and feeling like, oh, you've reached that. It did it really change anything? No. The business didn't transform overnight when it reached that number, but it did sort of give a boost in confidence in myself as an entrepreneur. And this is a bootstrap business. I have no partners in the business either. I'm the CEO and the founder and the owner. So that for me as an entrepreneur, that was a milestone. And I think that definitely gave us confidence to say, hey, we've got something here. Let's keep pushing. I think that's one of them. The others I think are always like, when you sign brands that you really love or like brands that you know very well and you create results for them. Those are again milestones that for me was like, oh wow, we're going to be able to create case studies about them later on, which I just find really cool and rewarding. But those are also the materials and the pieces that's going to help us get bigger as well. So I would say those are the big things. But yeah, there's always a zigzag. I get surprised every day with new challenges, new things. But yeah.
And I love sort of the cyclical nature of the case studies, right? Like you put out this content, you create this really cool offer, you get this client, you talk about them, leads to other clients. That's very
Hmm.
exciting and motivating. And so like we're here on the Scaling Secrets podcast, and time has sort of flown by, and because we had a real fun conversation. I hope I kept you on your toes. Like you say, you go on a lot of podcasts. I hope that I personally have had you, Raphael, kind of think in a different way that other podcast hosts
Totally.
don't make you think about. But as far as in these last few minutes, as far as you like scaling your company, is there
Yeah.
anything really noteworthy as mentioning as far as like the infrastructure, the people, the
Yeah.
finances, the traffic? Like what should we know that maybe is not spoken about enough when it comes to scaling a business?
Um, Momentum. Uh, I think losing momentum is one of your biggest threats. Is one of the biggest threats to a business, and also one of the most exhausting things to gain back after you lose it. And I don't have a lot of regrets, right? I say every experience, every challenge we went through really helped me get to the next stage. But one regret I do have is that I wasn't consistent with our marketing and momentum from day one. Today we are, but there was a point where it's like, okay, we, put so much time in marketing and sales and so on, and then we get fully booked, and then we have a wait list of brands that want to work with us and we have to hire more. But then you get so busy that you kind of stop you start neglecting your marketing, but then you lose your momentum. And that becomes this cycle of like, all of a sudden, oh, you're gonna reach a point where you're gonna need more clients, but then you're gonna have lost that momentum that maybe took you 6 months to build. And then it's a bit like that panic mode of like, oh, we need to find new clients, we want to grow, we need to grow, or maybe, there's a couple clients that went away and we need to replace them. And when you don't have that momentum anymore and you don't have that constant flow of leads, it becomes unnecessary energy expenditure that's required to really gain that back. So the one thing I would do differently, the one thing that I would, repeat over and over again to anyone building any business, right? And I think this is applicable in every industry and every type of business, right? Once you have momentum on something because of something you did, figure out how to not lose it. That is the most valuable thing, right? Like never lose that momentum. That's the big thing, I would say. And my biggest piece of advice or biggest learning.
I completely agree with you. That's a huge insight. Don't lose that momentum. And we've
Yep.
all been there, right? We've all kind of looked back and been introspective and say, hey, well, when was my business on the way down? When was it on the way up? And sometimes you have these tasks that you think, well, what's the value in me going to this appointment or doing this podcast or doing this email
Yep.
campaign? Well, it's to keep that momentum going. And when you think about great companies that die and everything seemed to be kind of okay, well, maybe they lost this client, lost this traffic source. And so I think that's huge, just thinking about
Yep.
the momentum and like the daily attention, activity, obsession. And I just keep thinking about the team meetings that you're talking about. And we've all been there too, where we just kind of said like, well,
Yep.
we're doing our weekly meetings just to like kind of see how things are going and to talk about new ideas and what's working. And well, is this really that important? Should we strip this out? Well, that might be kind of the goose that laid the golden eggs. And we
Exactly.
want to keep that momentum, and that's very deep and it's important for us to think about. And so what are some next steps here as far as if someone is excited about SplitBase and your mentality here and the results they can get? How does somebody know if they're the right fit client
Yeah.
to talk to you? And if they are, where do they go?
We work with e-commerce brands that do between, 8 and 9 figures in revenue. So smaller brands, usually our methodology is not ideal for them. So, 8 and 9 figure brand is really where we specialize. E-commerce brands that sell to the general public, right? So no B2B stuff, is generally B2C. If brands want to work with us or want to learn more, they can go to splitbase.com. So splitbase.com and you'll find out, everything that we do, and you can reach out as well. But people can also follow me on LinkedIn. I post pretty much daily tips and tricks for conversion optimization and scaling e-commerce businesses. And even on Twitter, R Paulin Daigle. It's R and then my last name, which is French and a bit complicated, but I'm sure people can figure it out in the show notes or something.
Yeah, or like the way that autocorrect and ChatGPT, et cetera, can correct.
Exactly.
Type in Paulin Daigle as best as you can, and you'll find Raphael Paulin Daigle on LinkedIn and on Twitter. But most importantly, splitbase.com if you're an 8 or 9 figure e-commerce B2C company. And as we're wrapping up our conversation here, Raphael, it's time to put you on the spot a little bit, where I ask you about a fun quote or lesson that can either be related to what we talked about today or not at all related, but either way just gets us excited, inspired, and motivated to take that next step. So what comes to mind as far as a fun quote or lesson?
Fun quote or lesson. One of the, running a business is hard, right? No matter which business you run, there's going to be really, really nice highs and there's going to be a lot of very lows. And the highs is what makes running a business rewarding. But to get those highs, you got to keep plowing through those lows. And sometimes it's hard to, see the other side. And a friend of mine, it's just so simple. It's stupid. I feel stupid for saying that. But, a friend of mine, said, in those moments, the only thing you got to tell yourself is stay in the game, because you're the one who ends up picking your ending. So if you want a happy ending, well, plow through it. If you want an unhappy ending, well, then you can quit. But, that's probably not the ending you want. And it was just such an interesting way of putting it, right? Like, you're writing your own story. You decide how you want it to end. So stay in the game and pick your story. And it was just like, in the most challenging moments that I've had at times, sometimes just thinking of that kind of helped me get through it. And I was like, Again, it's so simple. It's almost too simple, but it's I think a great way of thinking about business.
And nothing wrong with simple advice. And if you ever put out a book, then there's the title of it right there.
Yeah.
Stay in the Game and Pick Your Story by Mr. Raphael Paulin Daigle. You heard it
Exactly.
right here on the Scaling Secrets podcast. But go to splitbase.com if you're one of those brands that wants to boost your conversions and AOV with a conversion optimization program tailored to DCC. SplitBase designs, tests, and manage high converting landing pages and on-site experience for e-commerce. So go there, click the Get Proposal button, talk to Raphael and his team. You're going to love it. SplitBase.com, splitbase.com. Go there right now. And Raphael, wonderful speaking with you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure being here.